there aren't a lot of examples of Christians getting involved in politics in the Old Testament, except for, generally speaking, all of Genesis, all of Exodus, all of Leviticus, all of Deuteronomy, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all of the minor prophets. My gosh. All of them.
Besides those, there's no Christian political engagement.
Besides
in the Old
those,
Testament.
there's really no biblical data to work with in understanding a framework where someone submitted to God would actively engage pagan governments of their day, working to steer them towards submission to a holy God. And the last thing I'll say is this. I haven't said much, actually, so I don't know why I'm saying the last thing. I'm going to talk again more. But one of the things to add to this is getting involved in politics is one of the ways a Christian can most faithfully fulfill the two greatest commandments, to love the Lord their God and to love their neighbor as themselves, because you may not care about governments, but governments care about you. And if the government of your nation is not submitted to the God that you serve, that government is going to oppress and choke and regulate and rob and steal and obliterate your neighbors, including your children. So if you want to do the most good for the most people, you need to ensure that your government is happily, gladly submitted to the moral law of God. That's Otherwise, it's going to devolve into tribalism that's utter chaos, or it's going to devolve into globalism and tyranny that's utter oppression where power is concentrated among the elites, and it's just not going to go well for anybody.
Okay, now, Josh, I'm going to come straight back to you in a second, because the objection to what you just said, so I'm going to say something, but then I'm going to come back to you, and here's the objection I'm going to come back to you with. The objection to what you just said is, yeah, Josh, but all the examples of political engagement in the Bible, they were all Old Testament. So in about 30 seconds, I'm coming straight back to you, Josh, with, yeah, but Jesus didn't get involved in politics, and actually he actively steered his disciples away from it. Now, I want to say something but I'm coming back to you with that here in a second. So on the Babylon thing, what I do want to say is you'll hear this a lot from, sort of, I don't know how to say it. There's a certain segment of Christians that are like, hey, let's stay out of the culture war. Let's stay out of political engagement because we're exiles in Babylon. The weird thing is, here's what we don't want to do. Let's not use one analogy that Russ has already pointed out is faulty. Let's not focus on one analogy to the exclusion of every other biblical analogy for how Christians are supposed to relate to the world. So there's a lot more in the Bible about victory, being salt in the world, light of the world, seeking the welfare of the city, a little leaven spreading through the whole lump, the kingdom of God coming on earth as it is in heaven. In fact, I just want to point this out. When Jeremiah gives us the command in Jeremiah 29 to seek the welfare of the city, even the word politics comes from the Latin word polis that means city. When he is telling them, so again, just think about this. When Christians say, hey, exiles in Babylon, we should stay out of politics. When in Jeremiah 29, he says to seek the welfare of the city, guess what city he's telling them to get actively involved in and seek the welfare of? Babylon. He's specifically referring to Babylon in Jeremiah 29. So let's not, it's like you said, it's just a moot point on exiles in Babylon. Now, objection number 2, Josh is going to go first and then we'll open it up. Josh McPherson, yeah, but Jesus didn't get involved in politics, and actually he actively steered his followers away from political engagement. Jesus told his disciples to go and make disciples. He didn't tell them to register voters. Paul didn't lay out a plan for a better Roman Empire. He told people to go and plant churches. Josh McPherson, what say you?
Oh, it's so frustrating. He literally laid out a plan to change nations for the better by commissioning them to go and make disciples of all nations. Like, that's the whole point. If our Christianity isn't making our individual self better, our families stronger, our communities more glorious, and our nation healthier, it's not actually working. So I would fundamentally disagree with the premise of that, in that when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, he's fundamentally encouraging us to be involved in all of life with our Christianity. If you keep the salt in the shaker, it doesn't help. You got to get it out onto our sexuality and onto our families and onto our politics and onto our laws. You have to get the salt into the world. Conversely, as well, he said, he said, you're the light of the world. So we're to take our light everywhere we go. Light doesn't discriminate where it shines. When you turn a light on, it pierces all of the darkness. It shines everywhere. So when people say Christ didn't tell us to get involved politically, first of all, there's some ways to respond to this. We're not living in the same context that Christ spoke in. In other words, they didn't have the opportunity to vote. They weren't living in a constitutional republic. They were living in a globalistic, tyrannical culture where they had no obligations or responsibilities formalized as citizens where they could exercise that. So it's not same context. We have both opportunity, privilege, and I would say obligation to be involved in such a way as to shape our government that our government has given us through our constitutional republic. That is a privilege. Second, we're going to say something, Ryan? I lost your train of thought. What was I saying?
Let me jump in real quick, and then you pop back in. I was just going to point out, I literally...
Yeah, I thought you wanted to say something.
I didn't mean to cut you off. When you're in the middle of this just
no,
brilliant...
That's okay.
He's giving me the little signal to come to him next, Josh. That's what he's doing.
But I literally heard someone this week say, someone said, hey, Jesus said to disciple people, not nations. And it's like, no, he literally said to make disciples of all nations, not all skin colors, not all ethnic tribes, right? Nations. And what do you think happens, bro, when you disciple all the people in a nation? You get a Christian nation. Right. And that's going to affect everything from the top down. And then when Jesus in the Great Commission said, how do you make disciples of all nations? Teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. How do you teach them to obey everything that Jesus has commanded? Not just in the church house, but also in the courthouse as well, in the schoolhouse. That's where you teach a nation to obey all God's commands.
Yeah. When Jesus talked about Caesar and our relationship to him, there was a fundamental assumption in Jesus' teaching that Caesar also bows to Jesus. Yeah. And who's going to teach Caesar that if the church goes silent? It's the church's obligation and responsibility and privilege to remind Caesar that the government is nothing more than a jurisdiction created by God for the good and flourishing of all people, only and if they are submitted to God's law. And so it's our prophetic job as the church to teach the clear jurisdictions of human thriving, which is the family, the church, and government, and to remind the government that they're submitted to God. And then lastly, I would say this. I think the Pharisees and the Sadducees were a political entity.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
They were the political entity of the day, and literally the entirety of the Gospels is Jesus combating, is Jesus confronting, and is Jesus correcting the political structures of the day in the Jewish world, which were the Pharisees and the Sadducees that were functioning as a mini globalistic, tyrannical, elitist government that were actively oppressing people because they were making up rules unto themselves rather than submitting to the rulership of Christ. And so I would argue that literally Jesus's entire ministry was combating the wicked politics of his day as embodied by the progressive left, calling themselves Sadducees and Pharisees.
Yeah,
Russ.
I mean, Josh is 100% right. You know, just like last year we had evangelicals for Harris. In the first century, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were evangelicals for Herod. It was like a subordinated political class that worked in conjunction with the Roman government and did what they can to, try to better legislate the daily life of the Jewish people who found themselves now occupied by the, superpower of their day, which was the Roman Empire. But, a religion that does not interfere with the social order will soon find a social order more than willing to interfere with them.
Don't stop here. Go watch the full message by hitting the video right here. And if you're looking for free resources and tools to strengthen your marriage, manhood, leading your family, and growing as a stronger man, head over to strongermannation.com. We've got resources and podcasts that dive deep into real life issues, fatherhood, marriage, and intimacy, and how to live clear-eyed in a confused culture.